guys, welcome back to Woods Tree Farm. I'm Phil, and today I'm working on some of the wood I got for free from my neighbor. He dumped it on my property, so I didn't have to put any work at all into going to get this wood. And I'm specifically working on, and have recently been working on, the wood from just one tree. And there was a whole lot of limb wood, a lot of really small stuff mixed in here. It's a lot of work. A lot of this stuff, many of you guys would say you'd probably just chip it or burn it, but I'm turning it into wood. And one thing that's standing out to me is how much is coming from one tree. So you saw what I just split there. That was loads of little small 2, 3, 4 inch stuff. Maybe not so much 2, there's a couple in there, but a lot of really small stuff is the point. And lately I've been splitting a lot of small stuff from that same tree. They pretty much sent me all the limbs from that tree, and I've been working through it. So what I've nearly filled up over there is the 7th tote from one tree. So if each tote is 1/4 of a cord, I'm almost at 1 3/4, and I still have a bunch of wood left from the same tree. So I've got a little bit of time invested in this wood. I know working through that small stuff is very tedious, very time consuming. There's not a lot of output for the time that's put in it, but the price was right with this wood being free. So that's why I'm doing it. So here's one pile. I think I showed you guys this in the last video too, but this pile fortunately has a lot more larger stuff in it, and this is going to make some really nice firewood. There is some little stuff mixed in here and there, and there's some knotty stuff that we'll have to kind of work around a little bit. There'll be some waste. There already has been some waste from this wood already as we've cut around some of the knots, and all of this stuff is cut into just random lengths. So there's a lot of random odd cuts at the end of the log. So I've got a pile of it over there. I've got a pile of it up at the front of the property where I've been working earlier, and that's okay. That's, you know, just a little bit of the output of free wood, is that you're going to have probably a little bit more waste than if you're getting logs cut at a very specific length already. This stuff here is one of my odd cut piles, and some of this will end up getting cut to length if it needs to be, and dried out and used in the wood-fired kiln. I burn a lot of waste wood in that, especially in the wintertime. And then I've got over here the IBC tote with my like 10 to 12 inch stuff. And I haven't actually sold any of this before, but I think there's a market out there for people with the small fire pits and the small wood stoves who might want 10 to 12 inch wood. So once this gets filled up, then I will go ahead and split that and separate it out and get it drying. I've got 5 little tubs of 8 to 12 inch stuff that was output from earlier this year when we had, or last winter when we had the Dyna Firewood processor here. We moved 40 cords of wood through it in 3 days. There was lots of odd cuts at the end of that, and anything that was of the right size we split up and have been drying out all year, and I just listed them for sale this week. We'll see if they do anything. If not, I'll end up burning it in my own fire pit. It's all right. But I think trying to turn as much of this into sellable product is what I want to try to do. Is what I always try to do. Try to waste as little as possible. The problem is sometimes when you start to do that is you start spending a lot of time on activities that generate a relatively small amount of revenue. The biggest revenue for me in the firewood business is just general firewood, and producing as much of that standard general firewood as I can needs to be the focus the majority of the time. So a lot of times I get distracted on these specialty products, I feel like, and sometimes I talk myself out of spending time on that and just focusing more on general firewood inventory. So I'm running today that Echo CS590, which I've had for I think 2 years now. It is ripping today. The chain is sharpened just right. It's running right. All good things. So finally got some bigger wood now to top off that crate. And then we'll go take a quick drive around and see how much of this oak tree is left here in the yard. And then I know the butt log is still over on my neighbor's property, which is like at least 8-9 feet long and 30 plus inches in diameter. So there's gonna be a bunch of wood coming from that as soon as we can get it. But at least to quantify what's in the yard, I don't know, this might be a 4-cord tree. We'll have to wait and see. Yesterday I was cutting wood up here. I didn't film any of it, but there was one dump trailer load right here. There's a couple branches still here, a couple blocks that I didn't split up on the ground that I need to pick up, but most of that trailer load got split and is represented in those crates back there already. There's another trailer load right next to it that was more larger diameter stuff. So I think there's probably a 1/2 cord here. And then back there is maple. We're not going to count that. Back there, that was another trailer load of just maple. That was actually what the tree that I assisted with. But of the oak tree, I didn't help with this tree at all. They cut it all themselves and brought it all here. And there's some big wood in here, at least a 1/2 cord. And I think there's 2 more loads up here across the way. So if there's already 1 3/4 in crates already split up, there's probably a 1/2 cord back there in log form. There's a 1/2 cord right here. So we're already approaching 2 1/2, 2 3/4. And there's 2 more loads. Yeah, definitely 2 more loads up here. Maybe 3. No, that's maple. Okay, so there's 1 right here. A lot of smaller diameter stuff, limbwood stuff. And as I work through this, I might get more selective and not split some of that really small stuff. But there's at least another 1/2 cord here, maybe 3/4 of a cord. And just in case you're wondering, that load over there is elm, not oak. So we're just counting what came from that one big oak tree. I think it's going to be a 4-cord tree because that puts me up towards 3 1/2. This puts me up towards 4. This is not as much right here. But so we'll be approaching 4 with just what I have on site. And then when I go get that butt log, that could be easily a 1/3 of a cord just from one log because it's so big. I think it's going to be a 4-cord tree, which is pretty impressive. When I go out in the woods and take down an average size tree that's, 12, 14 inches at the base, I usually expect that's going to be about a 1/3 of a cord, especially if it's a good straight tree. It doesn't have a lot of branching if it's in the woods. Those tend to be 1/3 of a cord or so, maybe closer to a 1/2 sometimes, depending on the size. But for one tree to yield 4 cords just blows my mind. I've certainly never taken down a tree that big myself. So it's pretty impressive. But anyway, this is all going into next year's inventory and starting to pile that up wherever I can. I've got a bunch of crates that I recently picked up. I think I showed you on a video that I still need to take the bladders out. There's, I think, a couple of them over there and a couple of them elsewhere. So all this wood will get into crates, and then we'll be able to see it all at once, and I'll be able to tell you what it is. What we picked up with the maple tree, it's got a lot more of that really skinny stuff, which some of this I just might cut that into 2 or 3 foot lengths, and that'll just be fire pit wood here on the farm, because as much work as that little stuff is turning out to be, I got plenty of other whole logs out here that I can mess around with and turn into inventory without having to spend a whole bunch of time on that stuff. But the real reason I'm working on all of this is because I told my logger that I buy most of my logs from that whenever he's ready, I will take a couple loads of logs, and I need to have somewhere to put it. And I've still got all these dump trailer loads of logs out here to process, and I've still got a little bit of wood, a couple cords of wood from last year's logs that I need to work on, and that's what we'll get into here real soon. A lot of this was hickory, so I thought I was going to sell a lot more barbecue wood, and this was going to become barbecue wood, and so I kind of just left it here. There's a little bit of white oak mixed into this, but that is probably just going to become general firewood at this point. There's a lot of good stuff in here, so I want to get this moving. There are not runners on the ground keeping this stuff off the ground, so all these logs that are in ground contact are going to start getting nasty real soon if they aren't already. So we want to process that as soon as possible. So that's a little update on the status of the logs and the inventory and what's going on around here and that monster tree, which I will continue to process and update you guys on in a future video. So I'm wrapping it up for now. Thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.